folks. In my first hurricane video, I talked about the importance of having water after a hurricane. For this one, my second video log for hurricane preparedness, I'm going to talk about food, one of my favorite subjects. Here are some basic dietary guidelines from the health.gov website. An active human male aged 15 to 35 requires 3,000 to 3,200 calories per day. An active human female aged 12 to 60 requires 2,200 to 2,400 calories per day. Young children can get by on less. For example, the children age 2 need only 1,000 calories per day. Soon after a hurricane, the electricity is still off, and hopefully your family and your home are undamaged or unhurt and everyone is okay. But before long, everyone's going to get hungry. So one of the first important things to keep in mind is the mindset, and this is regarding rationing. You need to prepare yourself and your household mentally to be flexible and not so demanding regarding the types of food that you eat, or so picky, because your food options will be very limited. Grocery stores are going to be closed because there's no power or streets are flooded. Your corner grocery, their electricity will most likely be off as well, so you can't go in and get the items that you're used to getting so easily. And refrigerators and freezers are not going to be on because there's no electricity. So anyone that isn't prepared to be a team player in this scenario in your household, it would be best if they could evacuate and get out of town, because you need everyone to be on the same page, everyone to be a team player, everyone to ration and limit their desire to keep eating. But anyhow, back to the subject. If your power is out and you have no generator or ice to keep cold meats cold, then it's time to start grilling. Start cooking foods first that are going to perish. Cooked meats may last only a couple hours outside of a functioning refrigerator. There are ways to preserve meat without refrigeration, but after a hurricane is really not the time to learn how to dry meats, dehydrate meats, or salt and cure or canned meats. We'll post a link to a website that teaches you to do that if you want to do that well in advance of a hurricane. So back to the raw chicken or the steaks or the T-bones and those kinds of things that you may have in your refrigerator or freezer. Get those out, get the grill going. You can get your charcoal in the grill or cut up pieces of firewood or use a propane grill to cook your meat well and have yourself a feast before it all spoils. Then if you do have some ice left, you can try to preserve the leftover meat in an ice chest until the ice runs out. So use this basic rule of thumb. If food has spent more than 4 hours over 40 degrees Fahrenheit, then don't eat it. Those are the recommendations that I've found online. Also, just being very direct, it is totally foolish to pack your freezer to the brim with food to begin with, but it is especially dumb during hurricane season to keep your freezer full of raw meat and other food, because during an extended power outage, it is going to spoil. And if you don't cook food and consume it within a couple of days, it's going to ruin, and it's going to make a huge mess. And there's also typically there's not trash pickup immediately after a hurricane, so all that rotted food is going to smell and it's going to draw flies and stray dogs and cats and everything else, and it's really gonna not be a pleasant situation. So if you plan to do some grilling after the electricity goes off, and most people will need to, have the following on hand. You need to have a grill, matches, preferably waterproof, charcoal or bits of wood if you have a conventional grill, and some charcoal lighter. Also, if you have a propane grill, you'll need to have some propane bottles for that. Next, I'm going to go down a list of ideas for long-term food storage ideas, and the most important thing to consider is having foods that do not require refrigeration. Now I'm going to go through a list of the types of food you may want to have available after the hurricane. I talked about water in my first video in this series. I dedicated the entire video to just that, and I highly recommend that you watch that in sequence with the rest of the preparation videos I'm preparing. We've provided the link in the description below so you can get to that. One thing you might want to have available though, so like for bottled water this size, many stores sell these type of packets that you can add to a bottle of water and really make it all kinds of flavors. Water just by itself can be a little boring to some of us. And so adding these different flavors and things that taste like tea or lemonade, fruit punch, etc., can really, liven up the taste buds. And then you also have these big mixes of Gatorade that you can get, and sometimes maybe the bottles will be gone, but they have this powder you can make your own. And they have a table on the back that tells you how much Gatorade powder to add per ounce. The next thing will be milk. I admit one of my weaknesses is drinking cold milk in the mornings with cereal or a breakfast. And that is also one of the first things to vanish from the grocery store shelves. Also one of the first things to spoil quickly in the heat. Here are a few options to satisfy those cravings for milk that can be stored for up to a year before you use them. If you can see this in the camera there, this is one type of milk. Gossner U.H.T. It's called ultra high temperature milk, and that's in regard to how they treat the milk. This is a box of milk, as you can see. I found these at a Dollar Tree here in Texas. The great thing about this is you don't have to mix anything with it, and it does not have to be refrigerated. I'm doing this video on May 23rd, and this does not expire until April 4th, 2021. So it has a very long fresh date. It is best served chilled, but it is okay without. It is shelf stable, but after you open it, you will need to refrigerator to keep it cool. So if you have a crowd there or the family, open it up, consume it all. Another option is evaporated milk. Comes in a can, and what you can do, there's a 1-to-1 ratio. Get you a measuring cup, measure out half a cup of this, put in half a cup of water, and what you have done is what they call reconstituted milk. So you have something that tastes like milk, and you were able to just create it. Did not require refrigeration, so you're good to go on that. One of the most common things also is powdered milk called non-fat dry milk. That is definitely the most different tasting of the milk. It has the longest shelf life, does not require refrigeration. To make 1 quart of milk using the dry milk, you add 1 1/3 cup of dry milk to 3 3/4 cup of cold milk, and you stir until it's dissolved. I think that you also call that powdered milk. For best results or best flavor, you put that in a glass container and chill it overnight. Obviously, that we don't have that luxury after a hurricane. Now moving along to freeze-dried foods. These are very popular with campers, people that are hiking, but it is by far one of the most ultimate ideas for long-term food storage. They dehydrate the food, take all the water out, and what you do, you get packets like this. This particular one is chicken teriyaki with rice. And aside, you boil water in a pot, you open this up, you pour it in, and then you stir it up, and then you let it set for a certain number of minutes. All the instructions are on the back clearly. And then after that prescribed length of time, you open it back up, and you can eat right out of this container. You have bags like this, also on the market, entire buckets like this. This particular one has 84 servings. So if you got you a few of these and you only had a family of 2 or 3 and you ration yourselves, I mean, you could go, a couple of months with just these types of things. And you make them in generally the same way as with this. Add the boiling water in there into the packets. Something else that people may not think of as a good long-term food solution, a long-term food storage, is peanut butter. Peanut butter is a wonderful food to have in your pantry after a hurricane. It is high in protein and requires no refrigeration. Even after you open it, you don't have to refrigerate it. So that's an extra bonus. For me, I can eat peanut butter straight out of this. I mean, if you have some leftover bread and jelly, that's a great combination. But anyhow, it'll feel like it lasts longer than just straight carbohydrates because of all the protein in it. Rice is a really wonderful food to have in the house, especially if you're married to an Asian. So there's a whole debate about white rice versus brown rice, but I'm not going to get into that here. We're just looking to make sure we can survive for 1 to 3 week interval and have enough of nutrition. And rice is a great source of carbohydrates for energy. Beans are also a great source of protein. They can also be added to the rice for added flavor and protein. Like rice, it can be kept sealed up and dry and can last a very, very long time. Something else to consider to have in the pantry are things such as pasta. These are some instant noodles. Obviously things like spaghetti and macaroni, and there's all kinds of other types of pasta that does not require refrigeration, can store easily, and is very easy to cook. You just, add these items into the boiling water. You can also complement those with things like pieces of canned meat. Another thing to keep in mind is have some spaghetti sauce on hand. You have the spaghetti and you have the spaghetti sauce, neither one requires refrigeration. and you can cook and be eating like a king after a hurricane. Other options are oatmeal. That requires no refrigeration, can be very filling and nutritious. It can be cooked simply with water. Other things to have on hand are things like granola bars, energy bars, crackers, nuts, trail mix. All of these are very filling and satisfying snacks. Some of them have lots of carbohydrates and protein, or are a great meal substitute. Now moving on to canned meat and cured meat. There's so many options nowadays for this. You get your protein, you feel like you've had a meal. There's just so many options. Let's see, look here. This would be like the entree. Here's some canned fish. Here's some tuna in a sealed container. Another kind of a herring, a fish. We've got canned tuna. And this is like a spam, a luncheon meat that most people know about. We've got corned beef. And don't forget, a can of chili also. It has the sauce and it has the meat in there with it. Makes for a great meal. And then don't forget sardines also. You add that with your rice and you have a great meal as well. Also, you got a whole meal in a can here. Here's one of the original long shelf life meals with the soup. And there's hundreds of types of soup that you can get, and it's so simple. As long as you have a heat source, you can cook a can of soup, have your whole meal there. And then vegetables, canned vegetables. For some variety and additional nutritional value, you have all kinds of cans of vegetables that you can get, long shelf life, easy to prepare. You just pour in a pot, heat it up, and you're ready to go. Now, one of my favorites, canned fruit. And you have also these types of containers of fruit as well. These are mandarin oranges, peach slices, pineapples. They provide a very refreshing treat on a hot summer day. Say you've been out picking up sticks that fell during the storm, or you're cutting down trees, you're repairing your roof. I really like opening up a can of pineapple, and it's very refreshing, it's sweet. You might want to keep it in as cool and dark as you can in the Texas heat. Also, things to purchase right before a hurricane. Fresh fruits. Here's some information that I found online. Apples can last up to a month if kept cool and dry and away from perishable fruits. Citrus fruits can last up to 2 weeks without refrigeration. But for those, you want to look for those that aren't quite fully ripe when you purchase them. They will ripen, after the hurricane. Also, fresh vegetables. Some can be purchased right before a hurricane. A good one to have are things, what we call root vegetables, such as potatoes. They can last for weeks in a cool, dark area. Something else to have around, some natural sweeteners. You've got honey, syrup. These are other things that you can sweeten your foods with. Something else to have around are some spices and basics, we call it. Obviously, salt and pepper, you want to have some of that around. You're going to be cooking all kinds of different things, and then just simply, may have a collection of condiments from fast food places in your pantry, and you have those out and use them. They don't require refrigeration before, and then you just you toss them afterwards. Also, staples like sugar, flour, cooking oil, coffee, tea, and other condiments will help you make life seem as normal as possible. One other thing that some people don't think about are multivitamins. You're not going to be on your regular diet, and if you take a multivitamin, that will help maybe fill in some of the nutritional gaps that you have while you're trying to survive with no electricity and refrigeration. Other things that are very, very important if you have small children is have a supply of baby formula or some type of substitute for that. And of course, you want to have diapers also. And then for those of you that are on medications, and the medicine's not a food per se, but it is very important to your nutritional health or your health in general. So have any prescription medications, well in advance of the hurricane landfall. Another good idea is to have a garden. Of course, you don't start a garden after a hurricane. Before the spring arrives, have the garden in the ground. And perhaps after the hurricane, there's some of your vegetables may start producing, and you can have fresh vegetables that you can harvest during the hurricane. So anyhow, I know I have not covered it all, but I think it's a pretty exhaustive list here. that should get your mind thinking about some of the foods you want to acquire ahead of time.